Hello and welcome back to the channel. So this video is basically about jobs that I will be completing in the garden between kind of the end of February and into March. There's a whole range of jobs which I do at this time of year, and the main reason why I do it now is because the spring gets really busy for me, both at work and in this garden as well. And I just don't have the time to do some of these jobs at that time. So this is why I do this pre-prep in order to save the time later on. So the jobs that I will be looking at is, and I will be breaking this down into sections for you. General kind of pruning, so things like pruning hedges, pruning back shrubs, and lifting kind of tree canopies and all of that kind of thing. Of course, a lot of the herbaceous has already been chopped down in the kind of the autumn time. So that's the kind of pruning section. I'll be talking about a little bit about pond maintenance and what to look out for and what to clean up with regards to ponds. There's also a general kind of maintenance sort of section, which is a bit more about kind of picking up rubbish in the garden and that kind of, you know, like leaf debris that's been blowing around, that kind of stuff. There's a little section on mulching and the benefits of mulching and why I use quite a bit of mulch in both of my front and back gardens. And there's also a little bit about another job that I do, which is cleaning up and putting out the solar lights. I usually find in the winter the solar lights don't work very well because of the lack of light and everything. So yeah, I normally keep those in the garage and they have a little bit of access to some light through a window, and that kind of keeps them charged over that winter time. And generally kind of mid to late Feb is when I will start to put the solar lights out, and I position those so that they uplight various focal points in my garden. So yeah, that's all the sort of sections. So I'll now sort of break that down for you now, and I hope you really enjoy the video. It's a useful kind of guide really to what you could be doing in your gardens at this time of year. And yeah, please don't forget to subscribe, and please don't forget to click the like button. And if you're enjoying the content and everything, I've got lots of videos on all kind of topics and various garden tours, which I will continue throughout 2025. So yeah, without further ado, let's have a look at the first section. So one of my February jobs is I check all of the hedging around the whole of my garden. And I've got a lot of beech hedges, privet hedge and laurel hedge. They're probably the main three that I have, and I generally just cut them to a line, and you can see all these like privet bits sticking up here. So that's a good example of what I would cut off with the hedge cutter. And I use a very tall henchman ladder to achieve this with a battery powered hedge cutter. So yeah, you can see all in the front garden. I've got, this one's a whole mixture of privet. I think there's a little bit of hornbeam in there. But basically, as you're going into the spring, this is how I like to have it, where hedges are relatively neat. They will start growing away in the spring, so getting them to a good standard is really important. You can see in the back garden here, I trimmed this back hedge actually in the autumn time. It was massively tall on this left hand side and shorter on the right hand side above the spar area. So I used a henchman very tall ladder on there, so it was a bit sketchy, but I needed to bring down the height on that. So yeah, I do hedging kind of in the autumn time as well, but now is a good time to do it because there's not nesting birds, and yeah, you can kind of, another good reason for doing it now is that all of the herbaceous plants beneath it are all, with the frost and everything, they're all cut back to the floor, so you can get the ladder in there. For practical reasons, it's a lot easier, although it is quite a cold job to do. So today is only literally about 2 degrees. We've just come out of, it's early, kind of early morning, and we've got the usual British grey sky, although that's helped keep the temperatures up in the overnight period, so we haven't had a frost, but it's just very, very cold. So yeah, that's hedges. Always make sure that the shrub pruning is completed by kind of February, March. So you see we've got Elaeagnus here, which has been trimmed up into a rough shape. They put loads of growth on over the kind of summer and everything, so you've got to hack them back a little bit. This is a Portuguese laurel, and sometimes I let the shrubs go in a kind of more natural kind of state. That goes well with the garden rather than too manicured. Also at this time I would trim back things like the eucalyptus, which is near my pond area, because I don't want that to get absolutely huge. So yeah, I will trim those back. So I do a bit of tree pruning. You can see in the middle of the shot there, I've pruned the Norway maple back. It's kind of easier to do at this time of year as well because it hasn't got the leaves on. So you can see the skeleton of the tree, and I basically cut them back so that I can maintain them with my tall henchman ladder. If they get too big, I've got a sycamore which was already too big when I first arrived in the garden, and it's now obviously being allowed to grow into a proper tree on there. So it does add quite a bit of height, which is good as well. So yeah, I will prune any trees, any branches that are going in the wrong directions as well. So that obviously sets things up well for the spring. Wisteria are generally all pruned back, ready to go. Any new runners are putting onto the wire up there on the top there. But yeah, my wisteria actually doesn't put on a huge amount of growth each year. It's not too bad actually. I think this one's the Chinese wisteria, so it's supposed to be quite a rampant one. But yeah, it's not too bad. So yeah, climbers I will put back into kind of position. Things like the clematis on the side here, you can see we've got new shoots all emerging, but they probably will get frosted off if we do get much lower temperatures. So I try to remove a lot of this bulk because earlier on it was kind of sticking right out here. So I remove the bulk on the climber, on this one on the corner, because it sort of obscures the view. You can see on the side of the house I've got another clematis. I think it's a Mandii, which is the evergreen one. So this time of year I will be pruning around the windows, just tidying those up. We've got another wisteria on the side of the house here, but this one's a different variety. I can't remember which one it is. But yeah, again, I've got quite a lot of climbing roses, so try to prune those back a little bit, especially away from things like downpipes and gutters and things like that. So I like to try and keep a bit of growth on my roses, so I don't like them to be taken back loads, because I like them to, in the sort of summertime, to have a much more kind of looser feel rather than having them really tight against the wall. So I like them to kind of come out and do their thing and flower and everything. So yeah, I will tidy up climbers in sort of this February, March period, just as all the new kind of buds are emerging on there. So that's the climbers. Pond tidying is another thing that I would do in kind of February, March time. So this would involve taking out things like, I've got a lot of duckweed now emerging in this pond. So yeah, the way I would do that is I'd put a ladder across the pond, and then I use like a little pond net, and also I get in there with my hands and pull out weed and things like that. Now, today it is really cold. We haven't had a frost overnight, but it's now about 2 degrees. So this water will be absolutely freezing. So I don't fancy getting my hands in there at this stage. But you could use pond net and just fish out any leaves that have fallen and blown into the pond over the winter time. If you leave the leaves in there, you can normally, it sort of starves the pond of oxygen, and you can end up with really bad water quality, and you don't want to be putting loads of chemicals in to try and correct that. So yeah, so at this time of year, I will basically just take out any leaves, any twigs that have fallen in there, and I will cut back a lot of the plants which have been growing. And you can see the water lilies here. All the leaves have gone brown with the frost, so we'll chop those back, and then they will obviously regrow new leaves. I will also check, I've got a small little pond over here, and there's another pond which I've taken the leaves out of, which is underneath the sycamore tree. That had a lot of leaves in, so that's the reason why I did that one earlier. But I will also check things like the pond equipment, which is kind of, you can see it's hidden under here. I've got UV light, which then basically gets rid of the green water in the pond. And yeah, so I check all the connections on the pumps, make sure the pumps are all working okay, and all the filters on the pumps are not blocked up with leaves. They shouldn't be, because they haven't been on, but it's just making sure that all that sort of thing is checked, ready for the spring. Another job that I will do in probably more in February than March is mulching. So by putting loads of mulch on your garden, it helps in multiple ways. So in the winter time, it means that if you've got a good layer of mulch, it means that you are keeping the frost from really freezing deep into the soil. So it acts as a very good insulator. It also acts as a very good weed suppressant. So it stops weeds coming through, makes it harder for them to establish on there as well. In the summer, it's really handy because the mulch will keep the moisture in the soil, and you can use the mulch also to cover over your drainage, your sort of irrigation pipes, and that kind of thing. So yeah, in the summer it's really, really useful because keeping that moisture in. I'm on quite a well drained soil here on chalk, so it yeah, it tends to dry out quite a lot in the summer. So particularly when we're re-establishing this garden with all the new plants in, just making sure that we keep as much moisture in as possible. We don't want any of these to completely dry out, and I can control that with my irrigation to a certain extent, because as I say, I've got a lot of irrigation pipes around the garden, which is drip irrigation, and I've also got pop-ups in the lawn which also cover some of the flower beds as well. So yeah, that will be very useful to be able to keep some of that moisture in. Mulches are not just wood mulch. You can mulch with things like slate as well, which acts in the same way. It helps in the summer keep the moisture in the soil. It's very decorative, providing good contrast. So if you've got like what I've got here, so I've got a shingle gravel sort of drive, which is one texture. Then I've got the bigger kind of slate. This is like a sort of purpley blue slate. And then you've got obviously the wood mulch as well. So yeah, you can do different things with the textures, which just makes the garden look more interesting. But yeah, they act in all the same way. The only thing being, obviously, with the stone type mulches, it's always there. It doesn't rot away. Whereas the wood mulch does rot away into the soil, and that helps to enrich the soil. So you then get worms and other bugs kind of like bringing and breaking up that sort of soil that it creates when it rots down, and they help drag it deeper into the soil, which helps. You're effectively adding like organic matter into it. So if you're on kind of sort of things like sandy soil where you've got no real sort of organic matter in there, it really helps. And yeah, it just helps enrich the soil for the plants to then grow away. So yeah, mulching is probably one of the best things you can do for your garden. You can either buy that in from, I mean, you can get it from sort of tree surgeons and things like that. Garden centres obviously sell bark mulches, things like that. And there's lots of different grades. So there's kind of like play bark type wood chip, which is has like huge pieces which take ages to rot down. Or you can go for a more kind of finer wood chip, which is kind of, I guess, what this is, mixture of actual wood, and there's bits of kind of decomposing leaves and things like that in there as well. Or you've got things like manures, which obviously you can sort of mulch over the surface of your garden with that, providing a decorative surface, but also really enriching the soil. So yeah, mulching is very important, and it actually, I find as well, it gives a very good look to the garden. So it's like a blank canvas that is around all your plants. So your plants will then pop against that. You know, when all the leaves come up and it's all green, it will all pop against that nice brown kind of background. So that's partly why I use it as well, for its decorative effect. And as the plants kind of grow, it sort of covers over the mulch a little bit more, and you end up with a garden which is more green. But certainly in the winter time, or you know, in the springtime like now, it provides a very good backdrop. So that's mulching. So a job that I did yesterday was I did a light scarify of the lawn, just to get rid of, I had a load of moss in the lawn, so it's just to flick all that moss out with the petrol rake, and that produced quite a bit of moss actually, and quite a lot of bits of sort of dead grass. And I then raked all that up, or blew it up with a leaf blower, and then picked it up. And the lawn got a bit of a cut, which is the first cut that it's had this, well, probably since early December. So I've just let the grass grow, and I've put a little bit of feed on the lawn, and I've put a little bit of soluble iron, which greens the lawn up and just gives it a bit of a boost. We're not expecting massive amounts of growth at this time of year, but it's just good to try and get that prep work done. You can do things like aerate the lawn for drainage and things like that, although that's not really a problem with my lawn because I'm on chalk underneath, so it drains really well. But yeah, just doing a little bit of lawn prep, you know, raking out mossy areas. It's depending on ground temperatures, you could put some grass seed down and top dress it with a little bit of soil. That will obviously help it. As soon as those temperatures are warm enough, the grass seed will start to emerge. And nowadays, a lot of the grass seed's been developed so that it germinates in lower temperatures. So if you get a few hot sunny days, or at least sunny days, that will obviously help. The sooner you can get that sort of thing done, the better you can get it established before the springtime. Another little job that I will do at this time of year will be to generally tidy up the garden. So any kind of leaf matter that's laying around, I've got a petrol leaf blower, so we'll blow off things like the gravel areas, making sure wood chip is blown back in, and yeah, tidy up kind of anything that's sort of laying around in the garden. So bits of like insulation that have come out of some of the tropical style plants, I will pick all that sort of stuff up. Any pots that have blown around in the garden. It doesn't really happen in my garden, but if you've got like litter that blows into your garden, it's a good time of year to sort of pick up all that sort of stuff. Other little jobs you can do as it gets a bit warmer is you could pressure wash off the patio, which I will probably pressure wash the patio off in kind of like March time, maybe into April. It's just getting it ready for the spring without it being kind of, if you do it too early, then you'll get more of this sort of green algae appearing on the surface. So ultimately you want it cleaned for when you're going to be using your garden. But if you've got the time to do it this time of year, and it's busier in the spring, of course, so if you're busy maintaining other things, then it's a good job to just get that out of the way. You could do things like cleaning moss off of surfaces. It's not too bad. I got a little bit on the roof's surface here of the garage, so I could clean off some of that moss. And I'd use just like a scraper, like a hoe on a extension pole, for instance. So yeah, that's the sort of thing you can do. Sort of the odds and sods, kind of, you know, filling pots up with soil, you know, getting pots cleaned off, ready for the kind of springtime. It's all that kind of stuff that I find is good to get out of the way at this time of year, and then you've got your prime time of spring, either enjoying your garden or kind of doing the tasks in the garden that you really want to do at that time of year. Another small job that I will do at this time of year is I will get all of the solar lights out of the garage, which have been stored near the window, so they do actually get some light to keep them charged up. But I will make sure all of the solar panels are nice and clean so that the sunlight can get in there and charge them up. And I will then lay those out in the garden, up lighting, basically plants that are very architectural, and yeah, it just gives a really good look to the garden at night. So yeah, although there's like 4 in this pot at the moment, there would never be 4 in here. They are literally here because they're in a south facing position, so they are charging up, ready to go. So yeah, I'd lay out all my solar lights, of which I've got quite a lot. I use warm white lights for my garden because I find that gives a warmer atmosphere, and really goes well with the tropical style garden. But you can use multicoloured versions as well. And there's also the cool white, which is just as it sounds, it's a much more pure white. And yeah, that's also a particular look. And yeah, it depends on what you want to achieve really. But I get all my solar lights from Amazon. I think this is the brand Lighton that I use. I've used them before and they've been really reliable. So yeah, any solar lights will then go out at this time of year as well.